Hi, I'm Thomas Hare, Chief Content Officer of the Performance Driven Marketing Institute, a not-for-profit trade association that serves companies in the performance and direct-to-consumer marketing world. Welcome to the latest episode of Take 20, created by the PDMI's Brand Response Council. These 20-minute live conversations featuring leaders in the performance marketing world speaking about the hottest topics in the industry are scheduled twice a month. Before we get to today's conversation, a quick housekeeping note. We'll be addressing any questions from the audience at the end of today's session, but if you don't have to wait to ask them. Utilize the questions tab on your control panel to type in and send your question in. We'll be collecting them and we'll try to get to as many as possible in the final moments of this episode. Today's event, Hardware Acceleration, is the first of a three-part media series looking at the media landscape. Video hardware has been rapidly expanding its digital capabilities, allowing for more built-in streaming services without a cable box or other attached streaming device. As consumer behavior changes along with this expansion, what trends might follow? How can devices keep adapting to consumers' desires to watch whatever they want, whenever they want, wherever they want? To discuss this and more, I'm happy to welcome our host, Chris Foster, Vice President of New Business at Modern Postcard, and his guest today, Doug Bognar, Vice President of Sales and New Business for Apex Media. Welcome to you both. I'll let you take it from here.
Great, thanks so much, Thomas, and thanks you, Doug, for joining. We appreciate it. So, Thomas mentioned, the idea of the media landscape changing is happening in several phases. Of course, it's with the content, streaming technologies, but it's also part of the hardware changes too. Way back in the Wayback Machine, if you remember the first, of those devices, something like an Amazon Fire or the Roku came out, and the Apple TV came out. So those were hardware devices, and even at the time with the Amazon Fire, there was a little bit of a parallel between the device itself and the new content that they were creating. And now Amazon is a content juggernaut to pair up with their own device. So what I think is interesting as we start looking at the new landscape, as part of the landscape is the hardware changes. We know that consumers now are moving to devices that are created, whether it's wearable technologies or things like the Roku. And then in addition, there are new devices such as Peloton and Lululemon's Mirror. They might blend personal experiences and perhaps paid content. And it could be that those hardware choices offer different opportunities for content generators as well. Lastly, you got some other content providers will they join Amazon and Apple and blend their content and their hardware? One of the interesting notes that came out in the media was that NBCU is now connected with Samsung, which is great, but they're not connected with Fire ahead of the Tokyo Olympics. So it's an interesting place where NBC Universal as content provider is not master of their own hardware for the outlets. However, a lot of hardware outlets want to get that great content from NBC Universal, so they've got to make those partnerships. So Doug, let's talk it off and lead off to you. Where do you see the most interesting things happening in the upcoming 2 to 3 to 5 years?
Oh, I mean, there's so much there to unpack, right, Chris? Because the changes are coming fast and furious, but we are starting to see, I think, an alignment and a better definition of who you are and how you access that content, right? You said Peloton, and I know that you and I had a conversation probably over a year ago where I said, I thought it was very interesting what Peloton is doing, this incredibly dedicated community. What are they going to do with that?
Right.
There's an incredible messaging opportunity there, and they're really starting to take advantage of that. To answer your question more specifically, connected TVs, right?
Okay.
So the biggest screen in the house, irrespective of a plug-in, I'm aware of some, I think, non-public information that indicates that at least for one manufacturer, it's less than 10% are using a plug-in device to access their streaming services. That is a very, very powerful number, meaning that the ecosystem created by that manufacturer and like manufacturers is going to control the vast majority of screen time for that individual. So to the degree that they have those consumer electronic manufacturers have the ability to create interfaces and play nicely with all of the different services out there, I think they're in a very, very powerful position. Speaking for myself, I have several devices. I have a Flexbox from Comcast. I have a Roku, and I have a Chromecast. And I'm monitoring and utilizing each of those. And I think that's, maybe I'm different. I'm likely different because obviously it's my industry and I need to stay abreast of it. But a lot of viewers are stacking services and stacking different technology. Beyond that, we're talking about 5G and 5G televisions as they enter the marketplace at greater scale and accessibility in terms of price. And the telcos get involved with it. The wireless companies get involved with the delivering a hub system to the house. That's also a huge opportunity, which then brings in broadcast television, right? Because broadcast is going to utilize ATSC 3.0, aka Next Gen TV, associated with 5G to provide really personalized content and two-way communication with viewers across a number of devices. So it's really simple, Chris. I'm going to sum it up. It's a really, really simple system.
Well, and what I think is going to be an interesting play is not only the home devices with the connected TV, all the things that you had mentioned there, but also the portable devices and how those devices move around with consumers. So if you have not only the phones clearly, but I'm wondering also too, as phones start progressing and new phones come out, as they will, is there going to be more of a push to have those phones be a content viewing device rather than technically a phone? Is it a device that's primary job is to take photos and videos so they can be reposted on TikTok and YouTube and or watch your favorite content?
Right. I think that's a great example. Listen, I have I use Locast app so that I can view my local broadcast stations and I cast it to my television. So the replacement of the stick, the Roku or whatever can be transferred to that device, whether it's a tablet or a phone or whatever. So again, you're talking about a side door to streaming services. And what we don't talk about is what does that do to the set-top box that we have sitting in a lot of our homes. So the set-top box, very capable and powerful device, in most cases, I'll say it's very capable and powerful. Comcast, shockingly, has led the way in a lot of ways with what their devices can do, particularly the X1 platform. So is that our media hub for the future? How does that integrate with our mobile devices, our other wireless devices? So I don't have the answer to that, but there's a lot of potential there. So I'm really, really interested in the next several months, and a lot of it's content driven as well too. Depending on who you listen to, there's either 75 million or 85 million heritage pay TV subscribers remaining out there, and 85 to 90% of those stack at least one streaming service on top of it, likely 3 or 4 streaming services on top of that. So the issue isn't that folks aren't willing to pay for content. They certainly are, but they're also balancing that with convenience. And it is not convenient right now. The holy grail is how do you manage all these subscriptions? How do you manage your broadcast? How do you broadcast stations locally into one sort of seamless unit that inarguably cable has resolved for most of our lifetimes? So that's the holy grail of devices.
Right, and what's interesting about that, Doug, is that we know that product launches, especially from major electronics providers like Sony and or Samsung, and they make a television. It's not like they make it in a couple of months. It's 18 months. It's X number of years. The technology has to be built into the manufacturing of the device. But the landscape changes so rapidly in those product launch cycles that I don't know how you'd be able to build a device right now projecting what streaming services are going to be available in 2 or 3 years. And do you bake that into the hardware of the piece, or do you have something that's more flexible where the user can shuffle it around? I personally have an Apple TV, And what's interesting about that is it has an app, right? So you're able to, technically the flexibility of the Apple TV is anything that's got an app can be used, right? Because I can access the app and download it and apply it to my television, and it connects and syncs up with my other products. And so that's, to me, a really interesting blend of the hardware connectivity between the Apple TV and my phone. But now that Apple's also getting into original content generation, they're in both places.
Right.
Do you see other people or other brands besides Amazon and or Apple doing both of those things?
Oh, great question. I think the Walmart play is really interesting right now.
Right.
So right answer? Apparently that was the right answer. So Walmart came out with the on device at $30. Roku matched them in 24 hours later, dropping the price of their stick too. But someone of that size and scale, I was and let's think about it this way too. We're not talking about a domestic marketplace anymore. We're talking about an international marketplace for both content and devices. And I was watching the F1 race Sunday morning rather, and I noticed on a number of cars there was a Walmart decal, clearly visible from the cockpit view camera of multiple cars. And I was like, wow, Walmart. Yes,
Right.
yes. And so, obviously Walmart's a retail product provider in all of those markets, but Walmart probably has the big time strength and flexibility and capital to join that same sort of select group. Amazon.
Correct. So you could even,
go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I think Amazon sits out there. Prime Video sits in sort of a different place. I think Alan Walk wrote a recent column about this. It's that they're really driving. If you're a Prime subscriber, you get it for the 2-day free shipping, and then we throw in our video services. Now, of course, they also just dropped $9 billion on a Hollywood studio. So what happens next? Do they really make that a focus? You'd think so, but they're sitting on so much cash, you don't really know. I mean, that's the Google effect. There's a shiny new object, and all of a sudden, 6 months later, they move on to the next shiny new object.
What I think could be interesting too is because Google's in the hardware space, and now Walmart's in the hardware space. You could even imagine, and it's not too off beaten path, if Walmart has a content play, right? Kind of traditional middle of American, you imagine this collaboration between the Hallmark Channel and Walmart. It might be a pretty nice fit in terms of the demographics. You heard it here first. Or even if something, or if someone like Google puts original content there, there's so much reach and there's so much presence.
Yes.
That it's not beyond the realm of possibility to think that that's how they would go, because looking at what Amazon's doing in terms of crossing over what would be unconventional market spaces, which now they're in almost every market space, and figuring out how to apply their model to that, I could see that happening with other brands, blending the hardware and the content, meaning that you have a lot of control over who gets to see what.
Yeah. And you mentioned Apple too. So Apple, no one has solved for an unbelievable user experience better than Apple across the devices that they manufacture. They set the standard. What is the biggest problem with streaming right now in terms of barrier to adoption? It's figuring it out. It's figuring out, which service do I need? Here's what I want to watch. Where is it? And while Google would seemingly, with its search algorithms, lead that case, it's Apple, I think, that is the obvious organization that can pull that together and make that a really great user experience. Now, Apple TV, priced as it is right now, the device, it's not in the field of consideration for most folks because it's just too expensive, and you can get roughly the same thing everywhere else. So, well, and you can get all their content too on your Roku stick for far less than buying the device. So why buy the device? I have to believe that somebody smart over there is working on the long-rumored resolution to universal search and management of all the different platforms, including, as Scripps is begging for right now, and other broadcast ownership groups, the addition of broadcast television stations into that mix in a very, very seamless and easy to use environment.
Correct, and maybe that's an interesting way to think about it, because the landscape right now is a hodgepodge, and following what the customers are doing, and the customers though are also following what's available. Right? It's not like the customers demanded a Roku stick. Roku created the stick and customers followed. So
right.
I think it's going to be a pretty interesting dynamic between what the audience is moving in terms of their behavior and how brands are responding to providing those, and also then how brands are leading consumer behavior with the devices. And taking Apple, I know it's an obvious example that everybody knows, but the behavior change that they created globally when they introduced the iPhone, I still think is going to be written in a bunch of PhD papers in the next several years.
No question.
Because it's changed how we've shopped, it's changed how we've processed information, it's changed and created an entire ecosystem of apps. It created entire businesses like Uber and Lyft, which couldn't exist without the iPhone. So there's a whole wake that one single device played out. And then I'm very curious as to the new technologies and the new devices. I know a lot of people didn't show up for CES last year because of a certain thing called COVID. I don't know if you heard about it, but a big pandemic, bad trade shows, especially big ones like CES. But as as we start to unwind out of that, I'm very curious with those devices that will be showcased in the upcoming technology.
Yeah, absolutely agree, Chris.
All right, so we are coming up right at about 20 minutes. Thomas, do you have some questions from the audience for us?
I sure do. I have a couple. I'm going to kind of tweak the one that I've got here a little bit on its head because you guys were having this conversation. The question came in is, are there retailers like Amazon or Walmart, or a product marketer like Apple or Samsung who's the dominant leader in the hardware game, which is influencing or driving the future of media and content we consume? All four of those companies have been mentioned. You've kicked them around. Maybe you guys pick one. Which one's gonna take the lead?
Go ahead, Chris. You go first. I've got my idea. You go first.
I'm gonna mention somebody that wasn't a part of that group, Vizio. I think Vizio has been really smart in the development of their platform. They have the Watch Free environment, which is their channel lineup, and then they have SmartCast, which is their sort of app store, if you will. And I think they produce a well-priced quality television that has they're the number 2 or 3 most distributed TV, at least domestically. And they haven't flexed their muscle yet, but I think they're going to. So I would look at Vizio as one of the players, at least, that you just mentioned, Tom.
That's a great ad, Doug. I would never have mentioned them. I think that, to echo what Doug had said earlier, I think Apple, to me, is going to be the champion on this. And the reason I think that is they have so much cash. That the cash is never going to be a problem for Apple. And even though, of course, Amazon has lots of cash too, Apple is coming out of a hardware play, and they understand the hardware so well, and they understand the software so well, and the product form of all of their devices is forever and now going to be unified moving forward. Whether it's your watch, whether it's the Apple TV, whether it's maybe Apple Screen, right, which is going to be these beautiful fabric-y, I'm sure they have them in the Apple stores. There's no reason why you wouldn't translate that to your home device. With all of those items and all the unification of the user experience and their global footprint, I think that it would be a very hard thing to bet against them.
Absolutely agree with that. And I would also say this, Apple sets the standard again for the user experience. Everyone else has to up their game to match that. Your expectations when you go to a non-Apple device are Apple-like because of that.
That's correct.
Great answers, guys. This has kind of bubbled up a little bit here and there, so it's interesting to see the question come through. As more hardware ends up with built-in streaming options, what's the likelihood of a carriage fee environment a la the current cable platform network relationship? And how would that affect the future, do you think?
Chris, I'm going to think about it. You go first. I'll put you on the spot.
Well, this would not be in my realm of expertise, so I'm going to have a hard time answering with any credibility. I do think that the when you have devices that have built-in streaming services in there, it will never be able to account for the oncoming streaming services that are yet to be delivered. I think there are 300 plus now streaming services available. There's not a single device that's going to have all of them built in. It's just not possible. So there's got to be some other plug-in somehow to get there. Unless there is a single marketplace for all the streaming services that a single device can go to and find and search, which would be a technology solution. But A, I don't know if the marketplace exists, and B, I don't know if that device is being made right now.
So I'll say this: if the question is in terms of a retransmission sort of fee that we would know from a traditional cable environment, yeah, that exists already, and I think that will continue to grow. If the question references carriage as in terms of more of a subscription type service, no, because all the momentum is in the fast world, free ad supported. Now, there will be varying layers and tiers of service, like we've seen in the cable world. It's the great unbundling and rebundling, because in order to stop churn, you're going to have to provide a baseline level of service, and free is always a good level to provide. So I think that's sort of how things shake out. We're going to see the recreation of new level of technology and a far more personalized and customized content delivery system for consumers, and I think that's good for all of us.
Great. One more here, and that kind of gets at where you mentioned bundling and unbundling, and I think the consumer world of consumers beginning to understand that they're not really spending any less money at this point with all these things. With so many streaming options and so many hardware options, how are consumers dealing with them? Are they embracing change, or is there resistance, hence a longing for the simpler days of cable TV?
Well, I think there's always a longing for, I hit the button and it works, and I get what I want. But I will say this, again, this kind of goes back to the churn statement I just said. There's so much sharing of passwords that the policing action has not really begun in terms of sharing passwords amongst multiple users, and that will come. That is definitely going to come. Netflix is already making some news about cracking down on the sharing of passwords. So that will happen. In terms of the environment, it goes back to what we were saying earlier. It's just not that easy right now to access all of these platforms. And the questioner is absolutely correct. People aren't spending any less money on TV. In fact, they're spending more money, but they're spending it on something they want, and that power makes it valuable to them. That's, the number one complaint of any cable operator that they field every day is, I get 400 channels and I watch 10 of them. Well,
correct.
Streamers get, 300 different content streams and they watch 12 of them. But they're paying, they value the 12 that they watch to the degree that, they're $10 a month or whatever it is worth it.
And they'll choose it. And then Thomas, also too, I think that, the golden age of one cable box and one device, that might be a golden age for old folks like us, but for the youngsters in the audience, and especially my children, they have no memory of a cable box.
That's right.
They have no memory of cable at all. And so the expectation that they can watch anything whenever they want, wherever they want, is so baked in that that expectation will need to be met in the X number of years as they get older and have more purchase power. So where Amazon changed the customer expectation about having recommendations, Apple changed the customer expectation about what a device can do, this whole generation of folks have an expectation of content viewership that is, like it or not, it's completely entitled, and they take it for granted, but it's the only world they've ever known. And so, of course, they take it for granted. So I think that there is, to me, it's going to be I want to choose what I want to watch. All of it should be free, but maybe if there's some stuff that's a little bit pricier, I'm willing to pay for the things that I want to watch. Like Doug said, the control is on them.
Yeah, that's it. That's all. It's all about that customization, personalization, and the ability to make a decision.
Yep.
Makes sense, guys. I appreciate the time. I appreciate the conversation. I will say all of this is pending one thing that we didn't touch on, and it's not your area of expertise, but that's regulation. Because the FCC for decades upon decades upon decades has wanted to make sure that the people who control the content also don't control the delivery. And that's the big, and now with all this merging together, there's so much more of that now. There's content and delivery owners everywhere. Yeah. Is there going to be a snapback by the FCC at some point, or are they just going to kind of let it roll out? So,
Tom, I think it's happening organically. I really do. I mean, the horse went out of the barn when Comcast was allowed to purchase NBC Universal.
Yeah.
AT&T did their work after that, foolishly, and now they're unwinding that. And the word on the street is NBC Universal is on the block. So that is being organically separated once again. Now they're still controlling interests in a lot of those companies for the original purchaser, but it's happening.
Yeah,
I agree with Doug. I don't think the FCC is going to be in that arena at all. I think they're going to sit in the stands and eat their popcorn and watch the content just like the rest of us. That's my opinion.
Well, watch the companies eat each other up, And all right, well, thank you both. We really appreciate it. Everybody, your next opportunity to attend a live online Take 20 episode is 2 weeks from today, June 23rd, for the second of this 3-episode series about the media landscape. We'll have another great panel there. And then we'll close out that series right after the 4th of July on July 7th. So look forward to having you at all those. You can visit thepdmi.com/take-20 to check out the upcoming schedule and register to attend today. Until then, thanks again for checking out this episode. Enjoy the rest of your day, the rest of your work week. Be well. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks.